Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Brent Barclay. I'll be facilitating our program today. Welcome to What the CEO Needs You to Know Earnings Call Lab. Looking forward to spending some time with you today. And on behalf of Acumen Learning, I hope you and your family, as well as significant others, are safe during this kind of unprecedented times as we're dealing with the global pandemic. We're dealing with various challenges from an economic standpoint and even a personal standpoint, whether that's ability to go out and have dinner or go get access to supplies that we usually are so easily accessible. But thank you for joining us. I can't think of a better time to be participating in an earnings call lab. The chance to kind of get a feel for what's going on. How is this pandemic impacting the success of business? How does that impact my business as I think about my role, whether it be as a publicly traded company you may work for, maybe it's a privately held, maybe it's your own company as you look at trying to understand what's going on and how can I make decisions around a business. Well, as we get going today, we're going to use some tools. So I want to make sure everybody's comfortable with tools. One of the things we're going to be using is polling questions. So I've got a couple polling questions just to make sure people are comfortable with that. Let me kind of show you how it works. Here's the first question I've got. The question is this: are you a graduate of one of our programs here at Acumen Learning? We provide business and financial acumen training. Yes, I participated in a program this year, or no, hey, it was before 2020, or actually I've never attended a business acumen program. Now, when you select your answer, you got to hit submit to make sure it all comes in. And you'll notice these go pretty quickly. Got about 5 more seconds to respond, and that's going to close on us. So let's see, what do we get here? Giving you a few more seconds to kind of wrap up here, and we're going to share the poll results. It's like a number of you have attended one of our programs, so that's great. Welcome back. Good to have you come and re-engage around this. And if you haven't, no worries. This is open to anybody, an opportunity for anyone to kind of get a feel. So we've got about 40% have never even participated in a program, and then about 30% have. Well, welcome as we get going. One other question I have in particular around this earnings call lab. How many of you are returning, coming back? How many is this your first time to attend the What the CEO earnings call labs? Go ahead and answer that real quick as well. Interesting to see. It looks like, boy, we're getting a number of us are coming back. Well, welcome. Some of us is brand new. Excellent. Actually, looks like the majority are brand new. Let me go ahead and close that up. So that's going to be how the polling works. As you think about it, we got about 5 polls throughout today. That's our way to kind of keep you engaged. Sometimes you feel like, hey, I'm listening to a webinar, I'm going to kind of multitask. This is probably not the one to do that with. We're going to keep you engaged and ask questions. I love that involvement. It helps the experience be beneficial for everybody. Well, the second thing that we're going to be using today is going to be that chat box. And Ginger kind of talked a little bit about it a moment ago. And what I want you to do is make sure you have access to that. Make sure it is set to send to everyone. I want everybody to be able to see your comments or questions or answers as I ask questions throughout today. So here's what I want you to do. In the chat box, put in where you're calling in from. City, state, country, where are you calling in from? And just send that for. Let's see where people are calling in from. Ginger and I are calling in just south of Salt Lake City, Utah. Actually, Ginger's up in kind of that area. I'm a little bit further south than she is. You may recall in 2002, I believe it was, we had a chance to host the Winter Olympics. So we're known for our mountains, skiing, outdoor recreation, those types of things. Boy, look at everybody coming in all over the country, it looks like. How many international? We got some international I'm seeing coming through. Some Canadian folks, welcome. My wife's from Canada. I always love Canadians when they jump on with us as well. Romania, excellent. Thank you for joining us. Okay, well, that's how we're going to use the chat box. It looks like everybody's comfortable. It seems to be working. So let's go ahead and jump into our program as we get going today. So here's what I want. I've got another voting question. You're coming to an earnings call program. And as you attend an earnings call program to learn more about how to listen to it, my question to you is, when's the last time you listened to an earnings call? Go and put that, go and answer that. Now, this could be your or individual company's earnings call. Maybe you just like to listen to earnings calls. Maybe you're a salesperson and you're selling into a company. You want to understand what their strategy is. So when's the last time you listened to an earnings call? Was it this year? Was it last year? Hey, you know what, Brent? It's been a while. Actually, Brent, I've never had a chance to listen to them, or I'd rather get a root canal. It looks like at least 8 of you are saying that right now. So when's the last time you listened to an earnings call? You're coming to this event. When's the last time you had a chance to listen to that earnings call? Well, the poll results are calculating real quickly here. Let me see here. Let's go ahead and do that. And here's the results. So it looks like a lot of you, 41% have listened to a call this year, about 7% last year. It's been a while, never. And then we also have the root canal group. So thank you for responding. Well, let's go ahead and you think about listening to these earnings calls. Why do we listen to them? You know, what percent of employees actually listen to them? If you're publicly traded, it's quite a decent amount. In fact, our research suggests that it's only about 25% of employees that work for public companies don't get a chance to listen to them. What's interesting is even with people listening to these calls, look at these statistics. 95% of employees don't understand their company's strategy. Think about that. Even though I'm listening to these calls, I'm not really capturing the strategy, what's getting communicated from my executives if I'm an individual working for a publicly traded company. Not only that, our statistics also suggest that even listening to these calls, 90% of the employees don't necessarily understand the key metrics that are being talked about. When our executives are talking about, EBITDA, for example, they're talking about return on capital employed, free cash flow. What are those? Why are they important? How they impact them? Well, now imagine you're the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. In fact, this month we're looking at Tesla. That's how he pronounces it, Tesla, not Tesla. Elon Musk. Look at him. He's very innovative. If you've ever listened to him, he's kind of this future perspective, kind of cutting edge technology. And the whole goal is to accelerate the transition to sustainable energy. And he's part of a company that has 48,000 employees, globally dispersed. They have 6 factories and more factories on the way. One of the challenges with their supply chain is they're developing products that you can't walk down to the local automotive store and buy the parts. They almost have to create them or partner with companies to kind of create them. So supply chain challenges they deal with. And on top of that, add a global pandemic. Now go back to those statistics. 95% of employees don't understand key strategies. 90% don't understand key metrics. What is it that the CEO needs us to know? That's the title. What is it they need us to know? What is it they need the employees to know? What is it that they want their shareholders to know? What about customers? What do I want my customers to know? And then as well, what about those partners that I'm working on? How do I communicate that information? Well, folks, that's what an earnings call is. It's a chance for these executives to communicate to the market what's going on. They kind of talk about what they said they were going to do, how they perform, and how they're going to adapt as they kind of move forward throughout the future quarters. Well, these earnings calls can be a challenge as you listen to them. A lot of information gets thrown to you. Well, here's what I want to suggest to you today. I'm going to walk you through a simple framework, a simple process, and a couple tools that will help you to kind of capture what's going on in the business. Take that large amount of information, kind of synthesize it in a way that you can do something with it. That's what we're going to try and do today. So my guarantee to you is this: if you engage and you take these tools, you use them on the next 2 to 3 earnings calls, whether it's your company, a company you're interested, whatever company. After you do it 2 or 3 times, you'll start to get very comfortable with it. It's going to change the way you think about business. My guess is right now you're functionally brilliant. You know more about your functional role than I'll ever understand. But as you start to broaden your perspective and understand more about what's going on in the business, get in that big picture and then make decisions. Based upon what my customers are doing, here's what I'm going to try and do to adapt. Based upon what our executives want us to do, here's what I could do to have an impact. That's my guarantee to you. And the impact of that for you is that you're going to build your credibility in your career. You're going to build your career, and you're also going to potentially build your company. So with that being said, I want to jump right into this. Let's jump into the 3-stage process, okay? 3 stages of what we're looking at here. Let me just double check on chat box. Okay, it looks like we're still working on something. Thank you, Ginger, for helping us with that. So 3 steps: prepare, analyze, and apply. So let's jump into the prepared. As you look at the preparation around one of these things, first of all, let me give you some earnings call 101. You may already know this, so maybe review, but basically there's two parts to an earnings call. Number one is this, what we call the prepared remarks. This is where these executives come prepared to kind of share where they thought where they'd be, where they actually were, and where they see themselves going. It's their chance to communicate to shareholders, to employees, to partners, to the market, what's going on and how they're adapting or how they're meeting their expectation or exceeding their expectations. That portion of it usually lasts somewhere between, I'd say, 15 to maybe 35, sometimes even longer, depending upon what they're trying to talk to. Eventually, though, they shift into what we call the Q&A or question answer period. This is where the analyst community has a chance to ask questions, to kind of challenge the executives, to confirm or clarify what they stated. Well, the whole goal in mind is they're going to write a report and make a recommendation to their investors, whether they should buy, hold, sell the stock, etc. Now, what's interesting with Tesla is, as Mr. Musk, he kind of a couple of years ago, you may have listened to this call, where he's listened to the call and he felt like the questions that were being answered, in fact, the term I think he used was bonehead questions. And he said, look, there's got to be other institutional investors or even individual investors who might benefit. So as you listen to Tesla's call, it's not just analysts asking calls, but he actually uses this website called Say Technologies. We can actually go in and type in a question, and then they vote on it. And whichever gets the highest votes, they actually answer it. So kind of a unique approach. But again, you kind of have these two parts, the prepared remarks and then the question and answer period. So with that in mind, what do I do in the preparation period? There's basically three things that you need to do. The number one thing is you got to locate the call. You got to access the call. Now, if you want to do it beforehand, there's some resources beforehand and there's resources after the call that you can access. Beforehand, somewhere between a few weeks to even a month before, they're going to announce when the call comes. You can actually go to the website and you'll see that announcement. You can put it on your calendar. When you go to access the call, all you have to do is jump to that great website we're all familiar with. We call it Google. I know it's new to some of us. It's sarcastic there. All I do is have to type in Tesla Q2 earnings call. I type that in. It's going to give me that different information. I click on the first one here. I notice it's investor relations, Tesla. And it's going to jump in. It's going to give me some information. Now, just 2 days ago, I think it was, they did the annual shareholder meeting. So that's a more recent one. If I was really sharp, I would have got that done and all put together within 2 days and ready to go. But I went ahead and do the Q2 numbers. But right here, you've got what's available. So right here, if I want to listen to the call, before the call, it would just have a link you could register. Because it's already happened and I've already listened to it, I click on it. And it takes me right to the call. If I wanted to hit that button, it would jump right into the call, just as if it's the recording of the call. Now, if I'm preparing, if I'm coming to the call before, all I can do is I'll register there, and then it's all ready to go. So when the day of the call, you can jump right in there. Some other things I like to look at is sometimes they have kind of a press release. Now, here at Tesla, the press release is actually in the form of kind of a slide deck, kind of a unique approach. What's interesting is when they did the call, they did not necessarily kind of speak to it. They didn't say, hey, by the way, on slide 3, let me talk you through this. Ginger, is there something that's come up?
Yes, you just need to, you're sharing your slides, go into present mode.
Oh, you bet. Let me share the right thing here. I'm getting all excited about this. And thank you. There you go. So you should see, Ginger, we looking good now? We can see that?
Yep.
Guys, so I went to Google. I apologize. So I do that type into Google. It took me right here. I can go back and show you where we're at here. So right here is where I was. I just typed it in, Tesla earnings call. I take the first one. It takes me right here. I click on listen to the web call. Right there is where I get that webcast. And then right here, I have their kind of press release. And this is a great way to kind of capture kind of key points or key messages that they want to put together. The third thing I like to do is actually after the call is to access a transcript. Now, if you go back to Tesla's website, they actually don't give you a transcript. They actually give you the questions that were asked, but they actually don't give the transcript of the call. Well, again, you can go back to that great website, Google, and just type in Tesla Q2 2020 earnings call transcript. Click right there, and you're going to have third-party companies that kind of take that information and create a transcript. The one I like to use is called Seeking Alpha. You might jot that down if you want to. Seeking Alpha is a great place, and right here I jump into that, and there's the call right there. I open it up, and now I've got the transcript, word for word, kind of created. And you can download that. You can mark it up however you want to do that. What's interesting, at least at Seeking Alpha, right here's that call. If I click right there, it's going to play the call. I also have the slides that we just showed you, as well as their press release. Their press release was just about, hey, the call's coming, etc. Okay, so folks, that's the first thing you got to do. You got to access the call itself. Now, if you're going before the call, it's really quite easy. You just go, you kind of register, and then you're ready to go. Similar like what you did here for the earnings call, or for this webinar. You do a registration, and then you're ready to go. The link will be there, and you can jump right into it. Well, after you've located the call, what else can you do in preparation? Well, if you've listened to the call before, kind of review your past notes. Now, if you didn't get a chance to listen to the call, going to the same website that I had, you can actually jump back there, and I can actually jump back. And what I'll show you is that they have the prior quarters there. So if I actually jump to sharing Safari here again, I go back to their quarterly data, and right here, I've got Q1 information. Give me a thumbs up if you can see that. Make sure I'm sharing the right screen there. But Q1 information is right there, so you can get access to that. Excellent. Okay. Now that we've shown you how to access the information, let's jump back to the next step. So if I haven't had a chance to listen to the prior call, I can actually go in and I can access the previous quarter information by doing the same process I did to access the recent quarter. The last thing that I recommend you do before is bring a team together. Bring a colleague. If you're a manager, bring your team. It's a great way for your team to kind of understand what's going on. If you're looking at your companies, if you're looking at customers of your company, that's a great one. Or maybe just have a colleague. It's a great thing to do with somebody else because you can kind of ask each other, hey, what were they really talking about there? Get some clarification. So that's the preparation. Thank you. Is my audio off?
Your audio's it's on, working fine now. It was clicking off for a second there.
Yeah, sorry about that. I think we might be having some technical difficulties here. Well, let me go ahead and jump into the next stage. So that's preparation. Got to access it, review prior quarter information, and then meet with the team. Bring your team together as you go through it. Well, as we talk about the analyze phase, what we've got for you today is a tool. And you're going to get access to this at the end of the call. And this tool is going to give you a simple framework as you look at the call, how to kind of capture the data, and then as well some tools to help you capture that. So let me jump in first with the framework itself. The framework that we use here at Acumen Learning is called the 5-driver business model. I want to do a quick review of that for you. And as you go through and do the review, let's start with cash. Many of you are participants of the program, so fill in the blank for me. Cash is, put in the chat box. Cash is king, absolutely. It's the oxygen supply of a company. If a company runs out of cash, they die. It's vitally important that a company has cash. Now, during the pandemic, you saw companies, for those of you that were with us in the Exxon call last month, they were holding on to cash. In fact, they went from $3 billion of cash to $12 billion of cash because they're dealing with significant reduction of pricing around oil. You look at Elon's team, they actually increased their cash position about $2 billion. But why was that cash going? All the investment in their factory. So cash is vitally important for a company. And it's a simple way to think about what's going on in my business. Are they focused on cash? What are the levers that they're looking at? And how can I impact them? Profit, on the other hand, as we define profits, the difference between revenue that comes into a company and the expenses that go out for running that company. So revenue minus expenses equals profitability. In the class, we talked about 2 levers that impact profitability. For those that participate in our class, what are the 2 levers? If I want to grow my profitability, how do I go about doing it? Increase sales, absolutely. I can increase sales, or I can reduce costs. We hear a lot. We all hear about reducing costs. That's a key one for us. But also increasing my sales as well. 2 very fundamental levers to impact profitability. Now, assuming we collect that profitability, that eventually becomes cash. Now, as you look at assets itself, assets, we define that as anything you own or control which has value. So put on your Tesla hat for a moment. What does Tesla own or control which has value? Put in the chat box. What are some of the things they might have that is on their balance sheet? Absolutely. Factories, patents, intellectual property, they're mega or what they call gigafactory, Resta. Yeah, inventory, cash, absolutely. And there's this balancing assets. It's kind of this balance between how much do I hold on to kind of withstand the ups and downs versus how much do I deploy to expand my business to create greater profitability and cash flow. And of course, during the pandemic, you're seeing companies with different strategies. And Tesla has a unique strategy is they are continuing to build out, even though the industry's been down about 30%. Well, of course, growth, as you look at that driver, we all know what growth is. It's an increase or improvement over time. You can look at all the metrics in cash, profitability, utilization of assets, and look at growth metrics. Of course, as a publicly traded company, growth gets more time and attention than any of the other four drivers. It's because that's what drives the market. And so any company that's connected to the market, growth becomes a big factor and focus area for sure. The last driver that we talk about is that of people. Now, when we talk about people, there's a lot of groups that fit in that. Of course, normally we think about stuff like our customers, for example. That's one category. What is it our customer needs? How can we anticipate what they want and provide a product or service that they want? We also talk about internal customers, colleagues, peers, direct reports. How do we execute better together? That's also part of people. It could also be the partners that we talked about earlier. It could be our shareholders. How do we get everybody engaged in executing around our vision and strategy? Of course, at Tesla, it's a very vision-driven company. Accelerate the transition to sustainable energy. So it's not just a car manufacturer, not just a solar company, but it's trying to have a social responsibility, environmental accountability kind of role. So how do we get everybody on that same page and execute? Now, as you look at this model, this is a simple framework you can use as you listen to these calls. As you're listening to talk, what do they talk about? Cash, profit, asset growth, or people? And how does that impact what you do with it? Now, the foundation of the 5 drivers are going to be 3 financial statements. We're all familiar with them. The statement of cash flow, the foundation is the statement of cash flow is the foundation of the cash driver. The income statement is the foundation of the profit driver. And then the balance sheet is the foundation of the asset driver. So how do you use this in an earnings call? Well, in the packet we're going to make available to you, one of the tools is we call it the executive alignment activity. Here's how it works. Basically, as you're listening to these calls or after the call, maybe you grab the transcript. Every time they say something about cash, you put a little slash mark. Every time they say something about profit, you put a little slash mark, assets, growth, and people. At the end, you kind of add those together, and then you answer the 4 questions on the right-hand side. Now, don't worry, if you haven't taken the class, you don't have to have your expertise on defining each one of these drivers or know all the metrics that they may talk about. We give that to you. So right here, in each of the drivers, we give you a little definition or key metrics around it. And in addition to that, what are the trigger words? What are the terms you should be listening to that kind of align with cash versus profit, asset, growth, or people? So it's a great resource. Okay, they say something about sources of use of the cash. They talk about dividends. What about buying back stock? Okay, those are all cash things. They talk about increasing my revenue, reducing costs. Okay, that's profit things. Once you're done with that, you add them all together, and here's the 4 questions you answer. Number 1 is, which business driver seems to get the most attention? And I love the second part, and why? Think about the context. What's going on in the industry? Well, how's the global pandemic impacting the business, et cetera? Number 2, what are the 2 or 3 key messages or main points the executive's trying to communicate? What are the goals or trends as well as objectives that they're kind of talking about as they look at kind of forward looking? And then because it's an earnings call, what are the key questions the analysts are asking? Where are they kind of agreeing or where are they potentially disagreeing around what's going on? So that's the tool. Folks, what I want to do is as I walk you through, we're going to go through and do this, and I'll show you kind of how I filled it out. So what I've got is I've got 3 quotes we're going to walk through. And what I want you to do is help me determine which of the 5 drivers are the focal point. So here's the first quote. This is from Elon, their CEO. Let's just start with the first sentence. In the chat box, tell me which of the 5 drivers you talk about. I'd like to thank the Tesla team for exceptional execution in the second quarter, despite tremendous difficulties. Which of the 5 drivers are you talking about? Yeah, it's pretty clear. It's his team. It's people. Absolutely. What about second sentence there? They've done an incredible, team, so probably going to be very similar. And it's an honor to work with such a great team. I mean, there's so many challenges, too numerous to name, but they got it done. Absolutely. So the first 2, very much people. Let's jump here. He makes a transition to some other drivers. And as a result, we were able to achieve 4th quarter profitability. Man, the moment I see profitability, I know that one. It's right there. 4th consecutive profitable quarter. And although the automotive industry was down, to think about growth to 30%, we managed to grow our deliveries over the first half of the year. Absolutely. So as you're looking at, if you're looking at this, we got people up here. We've got profit right here. We have growth right here. So some great kind of examples. It's pretty self-explanatory. Now, let me be clear. It's not an exact science. I mean, you may look at it, I may look at it, and I might add some, you might add some. We might have a little different. But over time, you'll start to see this consistency. So Mike's got, delivering on assets, delivering on providing their products. Yeah, you could, Mike Wright saying, hey, we could have assets be part of it as well. Absolutely. But what you'll find is over time, you'll start to see the themes that they're talking about. So here's one. I'm not going to read it. You just kind of read it and put in the chat box, what are you seeing? What drivers are you seeing? So we're seeing a lot about cash for sure. Absolutely. What are some of the things you think? What you can see right here, right? He's saying cash flows. He's talking about cash right there. We also see right here cash flows. So a lot about cash, talk about cash, how much cash they have on hand, $8.6 billion, as well as how much cash flow they generate, $400 million in that quarter. We're also talking about what's going on with some of their assets right here, right? You could also possibly see something, yeah, looks like we got some assets going on there. Now, some of you might say, okay, this term right here, working capital. Man, I may have heard that before, but you haven't been to the class, so you might be like, what is that? Well, don't worry. Remember, we told you that in the tool, you're going to have that. And if you have, when you get the tool, the very last term that we have that's connected to cash is working capital. Now, if you want to take some time, do some searching, you can figure out what working capital is. Of course, right there, he's talking about accounts receivables, which impacts your working capital. So those are some of the metrics and measures that he's talking about. But this is very much a cash. You got some assets in there, some other things as well. Well, not only do you see communication from both their CFO, Zachary, and their CEO, but you get all those analyst questions. Now, like I said, the unique approach that they do here at Tesla is that they have this say technologies where they can actually ask questions. So the first three questions here are from institutional investors, where people have a chance to kind of go ahead and execute around it. But you also have individual investors. This Robert M. asked a question. Look, 700 votes. Robert M. had 700 votes right here. Oops, I didn't circle that very well. 700 votes as far as his question. So again, you could do the same thing. As you read through them, what are some of the things that stand out? Well, I just kind of highlighted a few kind of comments. You got monetized. That could be, they're actually talking about their software. So Tesla software, and how are we going to go about monetizing it? Well, of course, that could impact cash, could impact profitability. Software is the asset for sure. You also look at the next question. We're talking about what are the most important vehicle programs that will drive volume growth? You have this goal of selling 20 million units per year. What's going to drive that? And so they ask questions around that. Of course, what are some of the self-driving milestones? That's a big asset for them. In fact, you'll hear in a moment, that's one of the most important things they're focused on is their self-driving application, which they're talking about a version coming out here in just a couple months. And then, of course, the individual investor, which you often don't get in these calls. Robert asked the question around how does the market's not really viewing Tesla Energy, which is their solar program. They kind of ignore it. But what sort of growth rate potential is there? And of course, Elon kind of talks about, hey, that's going to be as big as the automotive at some point. And so those are some of the questions. Well, folks, so that's kind of how you do it. We don't have time to go through the whole call. But if you were to go through the whole call and you start marking them up, at the end, you're going to have something that looks like this. Now, what I like to do is I like to do the prepared remarks kind of separately, kind of see what are they trying to focus on. And then as the analysts or investors start asking questions, where do they end up kind of going? Now, as you look across the group, assets definitely was a big focus. Now, assets included everything from new products, the factories they're dealing with, kind of the investments they're making into solar and what the future is. So a lot about assets. Other ones that kind of stood out, obviously down here was people. You got some very close, not as much around cash, although that one question that one comment from Zachary was all about cash, not so much about cash. Okay, so you add them together. Now we go to the 4 questions. So that's what I listened to the call. I got it all captured. See what I've got. Let's answer the questions. The first question was, which business driver seems to get the most attention and why? For me, as I listened to the call, what I found was assets. They announced a new factory. In fact, on this call, they announced that Austin, Texas, they're going to do their next gigafactory. In fact, they even gave a little shout out to Tulsa. I assume Tulsa, Oklahoma, saying, hey, look, you did a great job, but we're going with Austin. They talked about their Shanghai factory, which is a factory that 15 months from kind of groundbreaking to actually production, but they're still ramping it up and still building that out. I talked a lot about the full self-driving asset. In fact, they said it'll be the biggest asset value increase in history. They talked about the idea of Tesla Energy or their solar program being the same size of automotive eventually. So why are they doing that? Why are they talking so much about asset? Well, think about where Tesla is. One, it's an innovative company, kind of cutting edge, new technologies they're developing. Second is this is the last 4 quarters is the first 4 consecutive quarters. They've had other quarters profitable. In fact, a few quarters last year were profitable, but not consecutive 4 quarters in a row. But they finally have had 4 quarters of consecutive profitability. So you're kind of still in this, building out this company. Similar to like Amazon, wasn't profitable for some time before they actually really became a profitable engine. And so they're talking about assets from the standpoint of they need to share that, hey, these assets are now in place. We're starting to get profitable, which speaks to future profitability, future opportunities to generate more cash and assets for the company. So assets was a big focus. Why? Because there's in that stage where, hey, you're not generating a lot of profit. You are profitable, but not a lot. And so here's what we're doing, and here's the future opportunities that we see ahead of us. Well, of course, here's a picture of the gigafactory in their slide deck that they had. Like I said, they didn't really reference it. It was almost like it was a press release in the form of a slide deck. But here's the picture. Look how large that is. And again, you can see a lot of it's still under construction as they are producing vehicles now, but they look to produce much more later. They talked a lot about these locations in particular, Fremont, which is kind of their main location, Shanghai and Berlin, and what they're going to produce, and then of course Austin. Of course, they have their Nevada plant. They have some other plants as well. But a lot of communication about what is our capacity going to be. Their goal is, in this year, to deliver 500,000 vehicles with a goal every year of selling 20 million. So you got to build out that capacity to be able to reach that. And so they kind of spoke to that. Of course, they talked a lot about their technology and software, battery capabilities, et cetera. And of course, they have their own battery meeting that they did just this last week, which was interesting. So the second driver that stood out to me was people. They talked a lot about their team. We saw some quotes there. They talked about their customers, their investors. One of the things that was so unique for me was their focus around future employees. They got this mission, I said, to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable industry, and we're looking for people to do that. I got to be honest. I listen to, I don't know how many calls a year, but quite a few. And this is the first time where I saw so much focus on we need people to come join us. It was almost a recruiting call as much as it was an earnings call. Kind of interesting. You don't see that. Now, why is that? Well, they're expanding. They're building all these factories. They need people, engineers, individuals can help them to kind of produce the 20 million units and sell 20 million units a year. And so that's what they're looking for. Kind of an interesting approach. Well, what were the 2 or 3 main points that I saw as I listened to it? I have a few of them. Innovation was a big part. Obviously, you expect that with them. That full self-driving, that was huge. That was a big factor that they talked a lot about. In fact, here's a quote. Right now, by far, FSD, full self-driving is just overwhelming the most important thing for monetizing our software. I think upgrading the fleet to full self-driving, especially with an over-the-air software, will go down as the biggest asset value increase in history. Think about that, folks. When this software goes out, the way he talked about it in the battery meetings, he said, our cars are kind of like laptops on wheels. Basically, they can actually upload, just like you would upload your computer, you can upload your car to be able to do this self-driving functionality. So when that goes live, I think they've sold over 1 million cars that are going to be able to have that capability. Pretty significant. That's kind of that future focus or key message he wanted to communicate. In fact, he's talking about a version of that coming out here in the next couple of months. And of course, recruitment, like I said, for specific time, he goes into detail. Say, look, if you're an engineer, come join us. He emphasizes smart engineering. He says, if you're in insurance, an actuary, and you want to think of insurance in a different way, because that's one of their products is insurance, automobile insurance, come join us. I mean, he was really focused on come and be a part of that. So that was a key message. What's interesting, though, is that's the key message that they communicate on the call. If you actually jump into the actual highlights, his slide deck, and the summary in particular, you see some additional stuff. Our business has shown strong resilience during this unprecedented time is a key message. Didn't really speak to it. Didn't say, hey, on slide such and such, here's what we need to talk about. He just kind of spoke to it as far as all the assets and all the opportunity that we see. Our profit improved sequentially due to fundamental operational improvements. Talked about how they reduced costs. Even though the market was down, we were able to reduce costs and basically break even on the reduction of sales side of it versus expenses. We believe the progress we've made in the first half of this year has positioned us for a successful second half. And while we invest our products roadmap, improve technology and localize production, we continue to drive cost efficiencies across the business and closely manage working capital, their cash management. So those would be some messages, to be honest, weren't really articulated as such, but kind of hit them as they were talking about some of these other items as well. So those are some of the key messages. Well, one of the things that's unique about those slide decks and very helpful is sometimes the slide decks can answer the questions in the tool that we give you. So the question number 3 that you answer after listening to the call is, what are the goals, trends, or objectives going forward? Well, what you find is one of their slides kind of spoke to that. Right here, look at volume. We have capacity. So one of their goals was to deliver 500,000 vehicles this year. Now, even though they had 2 months where they had to kind of close down on operations, they actually feel like they still could hit that 500,000 vehicles delivered in 1 year. So that's still a key goal for them. As far as cash flow, they feel like their liquidity, their cash available is strong to build out the roadmap, all the investment they're doing in these gigafactories, but also to continue to invest in new technologies around battery technology, new technologies around solar, et cetera. And as far as profitability, although our operating margin was under 5%, we anticipate that we'll eventually get to kind of these industry-leading levels, which, by the way, one of the analysts kind of challenged them on that. We'll talk about that in a moment. Anyways, they talked about the product capacity and kind of where that's going. Some of the goals they have, they're looking at basically the Berlin Gigafactory and the Shanghai will be fully ramped in 2020, producing the vehicles that they're going to produce. So a lot of focus on, we've kind of got some things happening, but boy, there's a lot of opportunity for the future. Full self-driving. New factories can allow us to generate. In fact, he talked about Shanghai. Eventually, we'll get to generate 1 million vehicles a year fairly soon, and then eventually help us to reach even a larger number. So a lot of emphasis of kind of the future potential of the company. Well, let's jump into the last question there. And the last question is, what key questions or concerns were raised by the analyst community? Well, like I said, one of the key ones that stood out to me was that profitability. And it was in the context of what he said, that right now, basically their operating profit, which is revenue minus your direct cost as well as indirect cost, operating profit's about 5%. Industry standards are somewhere between 15 to 17%. Some of the higher end will even get a higher percent. How are you going to get there? And the real question was, they get these electric vehicle credits in some countries, which are adding to their revenue. So the margin is actually higher, inflated because of these credits they're getting from governmental agencies. So a lot of question around that. Now the answer was, look, we don't build out our company to plan on having these electric vehicle credits. But in the short term, we're getting benefits, but in the long term, those are eventually going to go away. But other things like the self-driving software, other technologies that will add eventually to the package of their app store, they call it, for these vehicles, will add a profitability, and it'll have very high margins. So that's how they think they're going to get to that. And then the other question was around kind of supply chain. Think about this. You started a business where you can't run to the local manufacturing plant and buy these parts. In some cases, you're creating these parts. So the question really was, as they look at the slowdown in their deliveries to hit that 500,000, the question analysts were asking, how much of that was the slowdown based upon COVID, but how much of it is the supply chain issues, and particularly around batteries, getting access to batteries, the type of batteries they need to be able to do what they need to do. Anyways, those were some of the kind of emphasis that they talked about, and they talked about partnerships and other things that they're doing. Jennifer's kind of talking about, it's interesting, no one challenged him on quality, land resource stripping, government regulation, which could impact them before they get to solar. Yeah, they're interesting enough. I don't know if because 2 quarters ago, Analyst challenged him and he got frustrated. I don't know why they didn't challenge, but obviously they'll have limited time as well as they get going in those calls. Well, folks, that's the what we call the executive alignment tool. Now I've got all that data. I kind of know which of the drivers, how they're kind of focused. Now let's jump into a financial tool. The next step of this is to look at their financials. Now, don't worry. You don't have to be a CFO here. We got a simple tool with any company's financials. You can quickly assess what's going on in the company. Now, as you look at this tool, on the left-hand side, I have those 5 drivers, the same drivers we talked about earlier, right? Cash, profit, asset growth, and people. Now, what I've got here is some of the key metrics, most common key metrics companies look at. Now, if you were to look at Tesla and you want to look at it more specific, you'd probably pull in like gross profit or operating profit. But here I just have net income or net profit. These are the most common metrics or measures that a company can look at. So if you're listening to these calls, after you kind of look at what they're communicating, I always like to say, well, did the numbers show that? For example, if they say their liquidity is strong or they got a good cash position, I want to see how much their cash improved year over year. Are they in a stronger cash position? If they talk about increasing their margins, I want to see, did the margins actually increase? Now, don't worry, you don't have to be a CFO here. It's very simple. It's adding and subtracting and getting access to the tools. So what you have here is the key metrics and what line items are you looking for to see those key metrics. Then it says, where do I go? The genius, actually, the real benefit, in my opinion, of this tool is it tells you where to go to find it. So if I want to access the cash and cash equivalent, I'm going to look at the balance sheet to do it. Now, in that category, there's no calculation, so I can just plug and play. If there is a calculation, we actually provide the calculation you can do. So, folks, here's what I want to do. I want to go through, and we're going to practice doing it. We won't get through the whole thing. We'll do a number of them. I want to see if you're comfortable doing this. So here's how we're going to do it. Let's start with cash and cash equivalent. Going back to the tool here, I'm looking for the line item called cash and cash equivalent. What statement am I going to go to find this? Put this in the chat box. What statement am I going to? I kind of covered it up. I don't know if you can see it there. What statement are we looking at? Absolutely. It's the balance sheet is where I'm going to find that cash and cash equivalent. Actually, somebody said, Deborah, you're actually correct. You can find on the cash flow statement, but most common place you go to is the balance sheet. So let's go to the balance sheet. You don't have them in front of me, but I do. So I'm going to show you them here. Now, if you remember from the class, it is a US-based company. They're listed by most liquid down to least liquid. If it's an international company, they're least liquid to most liquid. But because cash and cash equivalent is the most liquid, you're going to find it towards the top. So in the chat box, put how much cash did Tesla have on hand as of June 30th, 2020. Put in the chat box. You see that number there. How much cash and cash equivalent? There you go. $8,615, right? No, right here, it's in millions. So that's $8,615,000,000. So remember, he said they built their liquidity. Absolutely. In fact, in the last 6 months, look what's happened. They were at 6.2 to $2.4 billion increase in their cash. Does that help fund future projects? Absolutely. So there you go. You plug the number in. Well, let's look at cash from operations. The line I'm looking for is net cash provided by operations. What statement am I going to go to? Put in the chat box. Just make sure we're comfortable with it. What statement am I going to get my cash from operations? You got to look right here. There you go. Absolutely. Got a number of us here seeing. So I go to my cash flow statement. And basically, this whole section right here is cash flow. But the key line, if you want to capture in your notes somewhere, is this one right here. Net cash provided by operating activities. The difference between all the cash that came into our business minus all the cash that came out of our business in a given period. Of course, the numbers there is $524 million, so that's what we put over there. But I always like to look what happened the prior a year ago this time. Look at what happened. By way of reminder, what do you think you want your cash flow from core operations to do year over year? Go up, go down, or remain the same? Absolutely. They've over doubled their cash flow year over year comparison for the first 6 months of 2020 versus the first 6 months of 2019, which is a great improvement. Love to see that. So there's the number. Okay, well, let's go ahead and do total revenue. Let's jump to the income statement. That's the next one. The line I'm looking for is total revenue. You got the drill. So tell me, what's the total revenue? Now, don't be caught up. Be careful on this total revenue because they've got 2 total numbers. I want the total revenue. That includes both automotive as well as I want automotive as well as the energy sector. Now, it looks like a quick question. Why is certain figures compared to 3 months versus numbers compared to 1 year ago? Great question. So often on the profitability, they'll typically show quarterly numbers as well as where you're at in the year. So in this case, quarter and half year numbers. When you're doing the balance sheet, it's what they call a snapshot in time, which means literally they look at it as of those dates. So they take the end of the year date, and then they take the first 6 months date is what it is. So it kind of depends upon what statement you are. Sometimes in what's called the 10Q, which is their quarterly report, you can find some additional data that will give you better quarterly numbers. Let me know if that answers your question. Okay, so we got the revenue number. Excellent. So go back to my tool here. Plug in my revenue number, 6 billion, 36 million. Now I want to get my net income number. Again, go into that same statement. I want the net income attributable to common stock holders. Now let's do the quarterly numbers again, like we did for the revenue, quarterly numbers. What did we see there? How much net income did they generate? Yeah, $104 million. $104 million what they generated in Q3 of 2020 versus a loss the prior year of $408 million. So I plugged that in. Now at this point, I now have the metrics to do my margin, to see what the margin is. To get that, all I'm going to do is take my net income and my total revenue. So I plug those in right here, net income divided by total revenue. Now grab your cell phone if you wouldn't mind. This is one calculation. Let me have you do one. Give me a calculation. What's the net profit margin for Tesla in Q2 of this year? Take that 104 divided by 6036, multiply it by 100 to move it 2 decimal points. What do you get? Okay, I got at least 3 of you showing it. Mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. There you go. Oh, I got even more. 1.7. Now, what does that say? That says for every $100 Tesla brought in their company in Q2, they generated $1.70 of profitability. Now, what would you guess? Is that high or low? For every $100 you bring in, oh, Alex has already said it's a low margin. Absolutely. Now, their goal, though, is over time to start seeing improvements. And actually, if you listen to the call, they actually saw some cost reduction in their Model S and Model Y. They ended up passing it back to consumers, reducing the price of the vehicle. Kind of an interesting approach. But eventually, they're expecting to get those margins improving. So, folks, that's how you do it. It's adding, subtracting. It tells you what line items you have to access. Then I got to go get, where do I find it? What sheet? Do the calculations. I can see how we do. Now, if you don't know what they are, you can obviously do a quick Google search. What's equity ratio? Why is that important? What is return on assets? Those are great things. Some of you have been in the class. You'll be familiar with what those are. But you can start to see quarter over quarter what's going on. So here's what I've got. I finished the document. Average margin for the industry, Francis, was a great question. Interesting enough, on the luxury items, they gave some margin. It was actually on the operating income margin, where Tesla's at 5% in operating income. They were saying many companies are 15 to 17%. Now, depending on the type of vehicle, you can have higher margins companies or lower margin. But to get to kind of those, their operating margin is probably going to need to be 15%. And then you're going to see it lessen as it gets down to the net income margin eventually. Similar question. What's a good margin? Well, if you think about S&P 500, average margin, depending upon what year, somewhere between 8 to 12%, depending on what year you're looking at. And so at a 1%, that's a very low margin. That's kind of like a Walmart margin. But again, they're high tech, building out technology. Eventually, those prices will go on. It's like when you started in computers. The first computer you bought, you may have spent $5,000, but eventually the cost of producing them became low enough that it became very economical. And that's what they're working towards. So that's what, but the key factor here is that they went from a year ago, for every $100 they brought in this company, have a loss of $6.40 to a positive of $1.70. So that's a positive. Of course, you look at the numbers. One of the things that's kind of unique, their revenue has been growing pretty healthy quarter over quarter, but they get this little dip here. Now, this was based upon that production cutback. They saw a reduction in some of their numbers there. Yes, Jennifer, as far as your question, will margins different? Yeah, absolutely. Different companies, different margin. High margin companies, they have something that's unique, very differentiating, allows them to get higher margins. Low margin companies like a Walmart, Costco, very low margins there. It's not very different products that they're selling, et cetera. Let me go ahead and let's see here. Department of Healthy Margin. Yeah, you can look at by industry as well, Christine. At the end of the call, I can share some of the resources around that. Oh, it looks like some people are answering the questions. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. So if you don't want to look at it from a quarterly basis, you can look at it year-on-year basis. So for the first 6 months of 2020 versus the first 6 months of 2019. A couple of things that highlight there is revenue is up year over year, although quarterly it was down. Year over year, we're up. He's anticipating this will be about 30%. That's where he's thinking the growth will end up being, that number will be down here at about 30%. Growth by the time we get through year end. Of course, we see lots of growth, which we like to see, and we've actually strengthened our balance sheet to some extent there. Well, if you don't want to look at it from just a purely Tesla perspective, you can look at similar companies. So I got Volkswagen here. Of course, look at this. This is in euros, but 25 or almost 26 billion euros in revenue, quite a bit bigger than Tesla. Of course, why would I bring them up? Obviously, they're not automotive, but one of their big franchises, of course, is Porsche. And Porsche has an electric vehicle that competes directly with Tesla's high-end products as well. So that's kind of a factor there. But you see the numbers. The question that why might you look at these? I want to know how much cash they have available to invest and grow out their technologies, et cetera, is interesting. Then, of course, you can look at it not just within industry, but you can look across companies. Last month, we looked at ExxonMobil, for those of you that were with us, and here's Tesla. So you kind of see their numbers. Interesting enough, you're seeing those numbers. As you look at this, look at that net loss. Of course, oil pricing drop. Look at how much revenue they generate versus Tesla, but they're still getting a net loss as they deal with challenges around commodity pricing. So that's the analysis stage, guys. Now you got all that data. So what do you do with it? Well, there's a quote that says, to know is not to do is not to know. To know and not to do is not to know. Some say it's a Eastern Confucius or individual that kind of shares that. But as you think about growing up, didn't your mom say, hey, if you know what you should do, why aren't you doing it? That type of stuff. Well, that's what the apply is all about. Boy, once you get this information, you got to do something with it. So what's the application phase? There's basically three things I want you to do in the application. One is capture your insights. Now you've done the analysis. What are the 2 or 3, 4, 5 key insights that you came? I'll just hit a couple of mine. Number one, I was very impressed with how mission-driven Tesla is. I knew they were mission-driven. I knew their emphasis around sustainable energy. But when they start putting their mission over profitability, what I mean by that is as costs came down and producing their Model 3 and Model Y, they actually pass some of that benefit back to their customers, which is kind of a unique approach. They could easily kept the pricing at the same price and had all the benefits, but instead they reduced the cost and gave it back to them. So kind of that mission driven, which will impact the future of their company, how profitable they will get as they think about kind of the future. The other key thing that was just a key insight for me is how much emphasis they have on recruiting talented people to come join their team. Like I said, in fact, 2 times they said, if there's only one thing you can get out of this call, is I need smart people who want to do something revolutionary, are bought into our mission and want to join us. Come join us. So a big recruiting pitch was kind of interesting. The other factor that was a key insight for me was the challenge they face as an innovative company to access the resources to build their product. Batteries in particular, to the point where they partner with companies, but now they're producing themselves, but they can't even produce them fast enough. And so how are they going to go about doing that? That impacts the success of the company. Well, I won't go through all my comments, but those are some of the things that stood out to me. So what am I going to do about it? For me, I work for Acumen Learning. We do business and financial acumen training. So what am I going to do with this information? Number one, I want to look at their competition. I want to see how well are they situated in the industry. How are the competitors keeping up with their kind of innovative approach? And where are they winning and where are they losing? That helps me to kind of get a broader perspective of the industry. Second thing I want to do is here at Acumen Learning, we work with a lot of companies that either support or in the same industry or even have partnered with Tesla. So I want to make sure this information gets with my colleagues, our partners, our suppliers, or help them understand what's going on and how they can be a trusted partner. For example, if I got a company that's a partner with them, to understand, hey, look, if we can help answer this question for them, we're going to help them succeed. And in fact, one of the things that Elon said was, hey, if you're a mining company, you're willing to mine nickel in an environmentally friendly way, I got a big fat paycheck for you, a contract for you, if you're willing to do that. That type of conversation is kind of interesting. And boy, I want to make sure my colleagues, as well as those that we work with, understand what they're doing. And then on a personal note, I want to be more environmentally aware and more environmentally conscious. And I've got a brother who's done solar panels on his house. I thought, hey, I should look into this. And to know that Tesla's doing that, how do we get access to that? and learn more about the options here in my area. So those are 3 things that kind of came to me. So once you've done that, you kind of capture. Now, if I was an employee, it might be something like, hey, I got to figure out how to help us be more efficient, how to reduce costs, how to think outside the box around manufacturing processes, et cetera. If I'm a partner with them, how can I partner with them to help them meet their goals, which again creates a stronger partnership, et cetera. Once you've identified those 3 things, the last thing I suggest you do is to have a review. The review is basically this. If it's your own company, you've read your own, go ahead and schedule an appointment with your manager. Have a conversation. Here's the 2 or 3 things based upon what I heard in the call. Here's the 2 or 3 things I want to do within my role. If you've read a customer or a partner's earnings call, what would you do there? Well, you might meet with your sales manager or your account team, define kind of the customers or partners' business goals, go to market strategy, market trends, and important KPIs. Kind of create a plan. How can we kind of partner with them or get access to their business by becoming that trusted partner? And then if you're looking like kind of a competitor benchmark company, you might meet with your manager, talk about how we can differentiate ourselves, et cetera. But the goal is it kind of depends on who you're looking at. If it's somebody I'm just looking at for my personal, I might look at it and then get with a colleague, a friend, a peer, my investment partners, et cetera, and talk about how you may want to think about from an investment strategy. But do something with it. Don't just say what you're going to do. Go do it and have a conversation with somebody else. That's how you'll really make a difference. Folks, that's the tool. What you'll find, it takes you probably, if you listen to the call and do it, you're probably looking at an hour to 2, an hour for the call and an hour to kind of walk through, and you've got it once a quarter. My guarantee to you is you do that. Do it 2 to 3 quarters consecutive, you'll get it. It's going to differentiate yourself in your career. It's going to differentiate yourself, create greater credibility, et cetera, as you go. Well, folks, as we wrap up today, let me go ahead and offer some suggestions here. There was a question I asked earlier, by way of reminder, we've completed the doc. So here's my question. As you look at, let's see, I lost my question. Anybody happen to remember what the second step was? What was the second step in the prepare? Yeah, you want to review your notes. Thank you. Review your notes. I had a voting question that I guess it's not working here. So let me go ahead. Technology's giving me a challenge. Review your notes. Well, what are those notes? What we just created are your notes. Now imagine if you did this and you kept that and come back to it every quarter, you've got it. So my last question for you as you wrap up is, my challenge for you is, who are you going to assess? I got a poll question. Who are you going to assess? Are you going to assess the company you work for? Are you going to assess the company you sell to? Are you going to assess the company that you compete against or partner with, invest in? Or even are you going to assess the company that you're interested in? Any one of those. Who are you going to analyze? That's the goal here. Take this information and do something with it. So who are you going to analyze? Well, as I look at the numbers here, a lot of you are going to do your own company. That's the big number there. Next, we're going to have, most of you, it looks like it's going to be your own company. Some of you are looking at those companies that you partner with. Some of you, so a little bit around companies we sell with, company we partner with, or company I want to invest in. Here's the results here. So with that being said, I guess you're going to need access to the tool. So let me make sure you get access to the tool. Here is the tool. Oops. As a wrap up here, I'm going to put the tool in the chat box so you have access to it. Here you go. Here's the tool. Go ahead and download that. You should be able to access that and use it. My goal is to have you use it. Listen to a call, and if you choose to come back with us in a month from now as we look at another company, let's see how you did. What did you learn, etc. That's the goal. Well, folks, it's been a pleasure to spend some time as I wrap up today. I want to, first of all, thank all of our graduates of our programs. Thank you for coming back. This is a great way to continue to build your business acumen. And you'll see the format's fairly similar. We kind of walk through the tool, but we do it in a different industry. I'll give you a chance to practice and get some great insights. If you're new to Acumen Learning, we provide business and financial acumen for 30 of the Fortune 50 companies. We do both live-in sessions, live virtual sessions, and also self-paced sessions. We also do earnings calls where we actually go to your company and we do a deep dive, not just an overview of how to listen to it, but how to look at it. If that's something you're interested in, stay on the phone or shoot me a text here, and we'll make sure you get somebody contacting you around that. Well, as we wrap up today, our next call is going to be on the 29th of October. We have not decided what company we're going to do. So here's what I need you to do. I need you to right now jump to this website. I put it in the chat box. I want you to jump to the webinar survey. Give me some feedback. What did you like? What didn't you like? But one of the questions I ask you is, who should I look at next quarter or next month? And by the way, it was Tesla and Amazon neck and neck. We chose Tesla. So we took your feedback, and that's the one we looked at. So please go to that survey, link that, give us your feedback as you wrap up today, and we'd love to hear what company you want us to focus on. Mark your calendars, October 29th for the next session. Well, folks, it's at the top of the hour. Thank you so much for your time as we wrap up. My team and I will stay on. If you have any additional questions, if there are questions I didn't answer, because we had so many on the call, happy to answer those. We'll stay on for a few minutes if you have any questions. Thank you very much. Again, make sure if you haven't, click that link on the feedback form. I want to make sure that gets out. That's going to help us determine who we look at next. Plus, it helps us know how to make these even more useful for you and your teams. As far as the recording, yes, if you do the feedback, you'll get the link to the recording for sure. So make sure you do that feedback and you can get that access to that. The link brings you to the main site. Let's see. This. Are you asking? Let's see. So we have a couple questions here, team. We need to answer. One, link brings me to the site. Let's make sure and get the link both on the. Let's see. Here's the survey link. The other link that we gave was the earnings call tool. So if you didn't get that, let us know. Let's see. We had access to the material as well. We talked about the slide deck. Happy to make that available. If you put your email in here, I'll make sure you get that. Access to the slide deck. I'm fine with you to have that kind of a review of Tesla. Let's see, what else do we have here? Does Tesla have an insurance company? Yes, they actually do have an insurance company. The insurance company is right now in California. One of the questions asked by the analyst was, do you see that expanding? The unique thing about it, and they were pretty excited about it, is the information you can get. Instead of trying actuaries guessing at what's happening as a driver, you can get that real just-in-time feedback, which then can impact your rates, et cetera. So if you want, in fact, the way Elon said, if you want to drive faster and a little more reckless, you can pay more. If you want to be more safe, you can pay less. And so kind of a just-in-time impact on that. They're looking at that as a resource. Ginger, let's make sure we save the chat box so we can get people access to the slide deck. Why do you think that they did a stock split? Well, Rustam, as they do a stock split, generally what happens on a stock split is if the price of the stock gets so high that most investors, it's kind of outside the scale of most investors, then they would do a stock split to get that price down to more investors, more attention to their stock. So once the stock hits a certain rate, many companies will go back and say, look, it's too high. The general investors aren't going to invest. So let's do a stock split, which then allows basically taking the rate of the stock. Let's say it was $100 stock or $1,000 stock, and they do a 1 to 10 stock. That means each stock is now priced at $100, which people who wouldn't pay $1,000 are now willing to pay $100. Let me know if that answers your question there. Let's see, was there any company? Yes, we will say hi to Kenny. I think he's training right now. Thank you, Mary. Good to have you on the course today. Let's see, there was a question on human capital. Am I missing that question, or Mike, are you asking a question? I'm kind of scrolling through the. Oh, Ethel, thank you for your recommendation. Retail, convenience store, Dollar General, or 7-Eleven. Okay. Let's make sure we capture some of those recommendations. If you go to our feedback form, you can put the recommendations for us to kind of consolidate and look at those that have the higher recommendations as far as who we do next. Mark, that's a good idea. Looking at a pharma company working with COVID vaccine. In fact, I think a few of our clients are in that industry. Let's see. We're getting a black screen. I don't know. Brooklyn's on the line. Brooklyn, can we help? They're getting a black screen on the earnings call. Maybe if we just had his email, we could just send him a direct. It's accessing the tool. Actually, you know what? I can probably. Kadra, if you put your email, I'll send you a link to the tool, or I'll send you the tool in an email. I don't know why you're getting a black screen on that. Took a couple times to, Janine, it took a couple times to get the earnings to open. Are you talking about the call itself? Did you get blocked as you came in? Or the site? Are you talking about okay, my link? It took us a couple times for it to go. Okay, that's good feedback. We do have a number of people trying to access it at the same time, so that may be causing some problems. Yeah, Ginger, let's make sure and get these emails and we'll get that tool sent. In fact, we'll send the tool to everybody who was on the list just to make sure you got it. We'll make sure and get that out to you. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to see if I can do a quick transfer, and then you can just download it from here, see if that works. Okay, folks, any other questions that we can answer? Okay, folks, we got about 81 of you still on the phone. I have put a file transfer doc. Ginger, let me know if you can see that on the screen, the file transfer. Can you see that?
Yes, I can see it. You just
So
need to
folks,
and then download.
yeah, so folks, here's the tool. I just put it here. If you're having a hard time, you can click on that, hit download. You should be able to bring that file directly from WebEx versus trying to get off our website. I'm not quite sure why it's giving you challenges. I was trying to save it as a text file, okay? Thank you, Mick. That gives us some good data points. Yes, Francis, feel free to email me any questions you have, for sure. It's at B for Brent Barclay is my last name, Barclay at acumenlearning.com. Happy to try and answer or get my team to help us answer questions. Much like Elon Musk has a goal of transitioning the world, we have a goal of more and more individuals understanding the business side of their company and being able to listen to these calls and make sense of them and use them in their roles and responsibilities however they want to. Oh, yeah. There's two of us. I gave it to you twice just to make sure you got it. Well, folks, we got about 61 of you. I'm not seeing a lot more questions coming through. If you have any additional questions, again, I can stay on here for a moment or two. If not, just go ahead and disconnect. That's how we know we can end the call. Thank you much, Cindy. Good to have you. Thanks, Stephen. Okay, folks, we're going to go ahead and shut it down. I'm not seeing any more questions here. I got 43 of you still on. If you have a question, let me know. If there's something I can help you with. Otherwise, we're going to shut it down here in about a minute. Let's see. Can you please clarify what is meant by a balance sheet reserve? Don, interesting question. Balance sheet reserve. Give me the context, Don. Is that something you saw in the document itself? Balance sheet reserve comes to mind for me, could be your reserves on your balance sheet, which would be your cash and cash equivalent or your short-term investments. Balance sheet reserve. I don't know if you have a context for that, Don. Oh, and the CFO was, yeah, he's just talking about a reserve. So he was calling his cash and cash equivalent, the cash he had on hand, his balance sheet reserves, would be my guess of what he was talking about. Oftentimes, when they talk about those, they could be in context of money they've kind of set aside for future investments, Don. So when they talk, it could be just the whole account, but they could also have cash set aside for future investments they may want to do. And sometimes they'll call that as a balance sheet reserves. Basically, I've allocated so much money for a certain project, and so they'll actually create it as a separate line item for them. Let me know if that answers your question. Okay, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully you found this to be helpful. Again, if you have not yet, make sure that you fill out the survey. Love to know your feedback. In particular, love to hear about what you liked about it, how we can improve it. But also, what company would you recommend we look at next month? Love to get some feedback on that. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you for your time. We're going to go ahead and end the recording, and we'll close this down. Thank you very much, and have a great day.